Welcome in, everybody. This is our first meeting with Alex here on the 5 Reasons Sports Network YouTube channel. Alex, welcome in. Today, we are going to be doing a season preview for Inter Miami. The season kicks off tomorrow night, Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time at Drive Pink Stadium against the Chicago Fire. We will have a pregame show tomorrow for you. So if you're looking for specifics on that, wait till tomorrow morning. We'll do a pregame show. And we will talk all specifics between Inter Miami and Chicago. But today, we're just going to be going over our general expectations for the season, what we're expecting from Inter Miami in 2022. As we know, the first 2 years have been a little bit rocky, and this season is our first time ever having a returning head coach, and it's also one of the biggest roster turnovers in MLS history. So that's where I kind of want to lead this show off with. As we're talking a season preview, the players obviously come first. Alex, welcome in, by the way. Welcome to the 5 Reasons Sports family. We're
Hi.
obviously going to be doing a ton more of this, but let's jump right into it with the players. There have been so many different departures, so many different signings, probably too many to list right now. The show would be over by the time I finished. But there are a couple of key ones. We can go from all the way from Deandre Yedlin to the center backs and Damian Lowe, Christopher McVey. What are the ones that stood out to you the most, and what are the departures that stood out to you the most?
Well, for arrivals, I'd have to say Jean Mata. I've written about him, talked about him before. I think he's going to be that guy that makes the midfield tick alongside Gregory. Another player would be Deandre Yedlin. Miami has struggled with that right wing back spot for their entire existence. So to get a quality player like Yedlin, who has the experience and still has the pace at 28 years old, even though that's not too old, it just shows that bringing quality players like that will help Miami. As far as outgoings go, I think the big one, of course, Lewis Morgan, fan favorite. He a hard worker. He ran every ball down. Um, Unfortunately, he had to go just due to the sanctions, and he was on a lot of money. But if that wasn't the case, I do think that he'd probably still be on the roster. So yeah, it's unfortunate, but Inter Miami built this squad with fight in mind. So whatever outgoing player left, I think they have a lot of players that came in that are ready and willing to replace whoever left.
I'm going to show a little bit of bias here, but as in, this team has struggled to find, other than I guess Gonzalo Higuain, who's played more of a deeper role, a true number 9 who is just in a goal scoring threat. So I'm going to put on my Ecuadorian bias and say Leonardo Campana is the guy that I'm looking forward to. It's not that I'm not looking forward to everybody else. I've talked with you about how much I love Jean Mota and his chemistry with Gregory that we've already seen this much in preseason. Deandre Yedlin is going to be huge. Like you said, it's a role that we've never had filled. If I go back and list the names that Miami have played at right back, I have Alvis Powell, Dylan Nealis, Nico Figal, who is truly a center back. I don't even know if AJ De La Garza ever even played right back. He always played in the third center back formation, and he wasn't a center back. So it's been a struggle at right back. So Deandre Yedlin solidifying that right side of the defense is really good. You obviously still have Kieran Gibbs on the left. You can hope that he's healthy throughout the season. And then the center backs too. Damian Lowe, bringing him in, I think is massive. What he's done with the Jamaican national team, the respect that he's gained on an international level is huge. You brought in a tall, hungry Swedish defender in Christopher McVey, who at 24 or 25 years old is at a really good age. And then after the loan, Jairo Quintero's coming back to solidify that back three that we expect Phil Neville to play is also pretty big. And as a young defender who has gotten a ton of international experience with the Bolivian national team as well, that back line's looking to be solid. The midfield looks to have a good partnership with Gregory and Jean Mata. And going forward, hoping that, Higuain and Campana can create, but there's still 2 more that we haven't even discussed. We have Emerson Rodriguez or Rivaldo, whatever you want to call him. Then you also have Ariel Lassiter. And Ariel Lassiter is one that has caught our eyes early on in preseason and continued to catch our eyes. I think he was probably the leading goal scorer if you take all the preseason games put together, other than, how many people? did 4 different scorers score in the Universitario game? I think so. There was an own
Yeah,
goal, Ian Frey, Harden, and Harvey Neville. So there you
yeah.
go. That I think Ariel Lassiter might take the crown for preseason Golden Boot with 2 or 3 goals. But he looks to be rapid, and we can talk about the style with this team now too, because with players, obviously, they're brought in to fit a certain style. The departures of the players that are leaving, not only were they leaving because they didn't fit the style that was going to work in Miami, but there were also locker room issues. Not Phil Neville, but Phil Neville has talked about it. But David Beckham and Jorge Mas talked about it in a press conference earlier this morning, saying that they want players that are going to fight, and they didn't have that last season. And so this whole roster turnover is because of a multitude of things. However, let's get into the style. You are the tactical mastermind here. I talked about the back three, but how else does this look going forward throughout the season? What do you expect to see Phil Neville employ on the pitch, and how do you think it's going to turn out?
Yeah, I think throughout preseason we saw Miami, stick with that back three, back five, whatever you want to call it. But tactically, it did look a bit different. Sometimes they played with a 3-man midfield. Sometimes they went with 3 up top, and depending on the game situation, Neville will switch to that. I think during the Carolina Challenge Cup, you saw Neville bring in 2 extra wingers. When the opposition team is tired, you bring in like an Emerson or an Ariel Lassiter, and they can run their socks off with, their pace and run out that back line. So switching to a 3-4-3 with 2 wingers and Gonzalo dropping deep, feeding balls for them in behind. It gives the opposition back line some trouble with that. So different looks. With that 3-man midfield and a 3-5-2. You get more bodies in midfield, and they can control the tempo more. And obviously with the 3-4-3, it's more of a counter-attacking style. Although you can get more bodies in midfield if the 2 wingers were to drop back with the 2 central midfielders, that double pivot. So it's more of like I don't have my tactical board up, but there's it's in my head. There's like a box shape in midfield where you can add in numbers. And it's more of like a midfield 4 instead of the double pivot. But I think tactically they're going to be a lot more flexible. I know they've spoken about maybe playing with a back 4, but we haven't seen that in preseason, and maybe it'll change. But for now, the way this roster is constructed, it's very much a back 5, back 3. Get the wingers in behind, have Gonzalo get on the ball more, have a strong back line of 3 center backs that can play the ball with their feet, get headers. They can do it all pretty much. So it's a really well balanced roster, and that's something we haven't seen from Inter Miami in their existence, really.
Yeah, well balanced is a pretty good adjective to use, because when I think of the back three and what they're going to do going forward, there are different ways to play the front 7 men in front of the back three, and other than the wing backs that are definitely going to be solid, you can see a midfield 3, a midfield 2 with an attacking playmaker and 2 strikers. You can do 3-4-3 with 2 wingers and a number 9. There are different ways to do it, and when you say well balanced, you can plug and play every single player on this roster into a Phil Neville style that he's trying to put out, and it just seems like it's going to work. And that's something that they have not had. They were having to stretch players out at times. Lewis Morgan dropping into as a wing back. That's another right back I didn't name.
Yeah, and Victor Ulloa too.
And Victor Ulloa played right back as well. So there's it seems like now there's depth in certain positions that is going to work. It seems that going forward, they do have this counterattacking mind where they have these rapid players up top. Gonzalo Higuain seems like he's going to be the core of this team going forward, probably being the one to play those balls in between the rapid attackers. Campana looks like a true number 9. It just seems like there's a true plan in place, and that's probably the benefit of having the first preseason in Inter Miami history. Like, this is the first true preseason that Inter Miami has ever had. It was talked about between Phil Neville, Jorge Mas mentioned it today. This is the first time they've got to have games under the belt going into a season opener. And with that probably comes a good idea and a good representation of what they want to do throughout the season. And they've also had time to bring in players, time to let go of players. And I think that with time, comes possibly good results on the pitch, and that's kind of what they want to do. We do have Chicago tomorrow against or at Drive Pink Stadium. But throughout the rest of the season, there are a ton of matchups that, well, some we haven't had before in Inter Miami history, and some that we have, and we're looking to get revenge. The first one that I can think of is LAFC at home on March 12th. That is a game that I think Miami's really going to want to circle and win. I'm looking at the first 5 games. We have the game against Chicago, who, other than Xherdan Shaqiri and getting Kasper Schmeichel from Philadelphia, Chicago was, not the best team last season. They have also had a major roster turnover. There was a lot of turmoil going on over the course of last season, but still seems like a winnable game, especially at home with a home opener. Then you have Austin on the road, who has not made as many changes as you would want from them, especially what they did last season. You kind of expected a little more in the offseason, but it wasn't there. That seems like a winnable game. The revenge game against LAFC at home, and then you have Cincinnati away from home, where they won twice last year, and then you come back home to Houston, who has a weaker lineup than most teams in MLS, especially if you look at last season. Those first 5 games look really good for Inter Miami. Alex, how important is it for Inter Miami to get off on the right foot? Because we haven't seen that before from them. How important do you think it is for them to start off strong?
Extremely important. I think, we've never seen Miami really go on a, get their right foot off in the first couple of games of the season. Going back to 2022, 2020, they played LA. Who do they played LAFC. They lost. They played DC. They lost. And then the pandemic hit. MLS is back and they lost all those games. And, looking at 2021, they played the Galaxy. I'm trying to remember the schedule. They played the Galaxy and then they played the Union, which they won, which is great. And then they went to Nashville and drew. And then after that, it didn't get better. So I think heading into the season with, possibly they could, maybe win all these games if they play their cards right. I will say that Inter Miami need to get more draws this season. Dropping points for losses aren't acceptable anymore. Look at Nashville last season. They had a lot more draws than Inter Miami, but they had the same amount of wins. But look at Nashville, they made it to, I believe, the 3rd seed in the East. So Miami, it's a really good opportunity for them. Chicago, they, like you said, Shaqiri and Schmeichel, but their back line, there's still some questions there. Austin, there's their expansion year didn't go too great, so, and they're looking to retool LAFC. They lost Bob Bradley, and they've got a new coach in, and they're probably learning a new style as well. And Cincinnati is Cincinnati. No shade to them, but they haven't been the greatest. And Houston, they haven't retooled as much as we thought they would. So that's a really, those first 5 games, that's a really good chance for them to pick up points. And it does get significantly harder, after that with New England, Seattle, Atlanta, New England. So if there's any chance, time to get points, it's it's the first 5 games.
It's right away. It's exactly right. They need to start getting points right away. That next stretch of games is going to be pretty rough. But I wanted to ask you, do you have a game on this schedule that you kind of have your eyes on? Just one, and I'm gonna omit Orlando derbies here. But I want to know if there is any other game that's on the schedule that you're looking forward to. Maybe an opponent we haven't played before, or an away trip, or a home opponent that just seems like it's always a good matchup. What is standing out to you? And tell me the date so we can circle it on our calendars.
I will say Austin away. We've never, the team's never played Austin. We've never been to Austin. So I think that'll be exciting. They've got a great stadium over there, a great fan base. So that will be interesting. Charlotte away. I think that will be a good one. Any expansion team really that you play, for the first time, it's going to be massive. So I picked those 2 games. And of course, there's teams that the club haven't played before, but I think those 2 stand out, Austin and Charlotte away.
I personally, I like to pick one away trip. I usually do multiple away trips, but there's one away trip that I always like to circle on my calendars year after year. The first one, it was LAFC that I was fortunate enough to go out to. I did end up going to DC. And then the second year, I took a trip with my buddies and we went to Portland, and that was awesome. I mean, that was a great trip. That fan base over there is awesome. Really good game, great stadium. Won't talk about the organization right now, but with the third year, I look at the schedule and it screams San Jose to me. Other than Seattle, I think later on in the season, San Jose is something that I believe that I'm going to be making out to. I think that would be an awesome trip. PayPal Park seems like a lovely place. San Jose seems great. It's in the summer, so it's going to be nice and sunny. So I'm hoping that that's one that ends up being a really good match. Another one too. For the first time, Inter Miami will be taking on Minnesota United, and that's going to be at home. And here's the thing about Minnesota United is that I really like the way Minnesota United did their expansion. And I know that maybe that's probably not a big point, but within the first, they started off terrible. They started off really bad. They came in around the same time Cincinnati, and those two were looked down upon. But within the fourth year, I think it was the fourth year where they made the Western Conference final. They lost to Seattle ultimately, who lost to Columbus in the MLS Cup 2 years ago. But bringing in Reynoso, they had a couple of really good names. There was a lot to like from the way Minnesota built their team, and I think that Miami kind of needs to take that trajectory. Not all the expectations were in year one and year two. I mean, especially in year one, didn't pan out. Year two, expectations were back with a new head coach, new front office, everything like that, and it didn't pan out yet again. And this season, they've kind of turned a new leaf. I think that that's a good term. I think that they've kind of turned a new leaf in that they've got a brand new team. As much as they had a brand new office in year two, they didn't have a brand new team. And in year three, they're now having they keep that front office with a brand new team, and that might just be the recipe for future success. So we're hoping that that is the case, of course. But I wanted to ask you now, Alex, with this roster build, it wasn't easy, right? And we have to talk about, when we talk about the roster build, you talk about the sanctions following the Matuidi investigation. How hard do you think it was for Chris Henderson to maneuver around those sanctions? And the fact that they're trading for international roster spots with general allocation money kind of tells you how this answer is going to go. How good of a job do you believe Chris Henderson has done with this roster going into the season?
Brilliantly. I don't think anyone expected him to get rid of that many players. I think he did a really good job with the restraints that are on Inter Miami right now. I think loans help a lot. They loaned out a lot of players, Pizarro, LGP. I believe I'm missing maybe a couple, but they loaned out a lot of players to get them off the books. Matuidi has been waived. I don't think it's official yet. The club hasn't said anything, but Matuidi's not returning. Lewis Morgan, they were able to trade him for a bunch of allocation money, which really helped. Julian Carranza, he's up there in Philly. I believe the club traded him for a draft pick, which is not the it's not a lot, but just the amount of players that he got rid of, it's absolutely incredible, and equally as incredible as him bringing in some really good quality players. On the squad, they've got a Finland national team player who went to the Euros. So that's, in Robert Taylor, that's absolutely, it's just really smart scouting at this point. And I'm amazed because I don't think anyone expected it to be this, that many players, but it was a necessity and a needed necessity. And genuinely, I think with Miami having to spend less, they're not going to spend it out on, Matuidis or Pizarros anymore. And this morning we heard Jorge Mas talking about how these last 2 years he's learned how to construct a roster sort of like a chessboard. You don't go out and splash the cash. In MLS, you have to be very specific in how you build your roster. So in this offseason, it showed. So it's super intriguing, and Chris Henderson and Phil Neville did a phenomenal job.
I would totally agree. I don't think any of us of course we expected something, but I don't think that anybody could say we really expected this and the magnitude that they pulled this off to. It's been remarkable almost. However, we don't necessarily know that it's going to translate on the pitch at the moment. Obviously, the season is to begin, but let's get now. We've talked about all the positives and the good players that have come in and how it could work and why it could be successful, but realistically speaking, Alex, let's get down to it, because Roger Terry came over here with a comment talking about, with everybody looking at Inter Miami and what's happened, only one DP now on the roster. Lack of success in the first 2 years, all very valid points. Teams are probably looking down on Miami as well. And if you look at some of the preseason predictions for Miami, it's not boding too well. And I think that for us too, realistically, we don't see this as a top 5 team in the Eastern Conference. There are too many strong opponents in the East. And as much as I hate to say it, I would put, New England up there, New York City FC up there, Nashville up there. Am I going to say the O word? I probably am. I think that there's a couple of teams that I would put above Miami at the moment. However, I don't think that leaves them out of the playoff race. And I think that that's kind of where I'm expecting bottom tier of the playoff race is what Miami is going to be fighting for. And for a very long time last season, that's where they were as well. And it wasn't until the second to last game of the season, after it finished, by the way, where they were actually mathematically out of the picture. So they go into, I believe it was New England with nothing to play for, get the win there. That was great. But yeah, so there's a lot to be said about where we want them to finish, but where they actually may finish. Personally, I think we talked about this the other day. I have them finishing in 7th place, and that is sneaking into the last playoff spot. And if they don't do that, I think that that's okay. However, if they are not fighting for that spot until decision day, there's a problem. Where do you see? How do you feel about that? And what do you expect from Miami in terms of long outlook on the season, where they finish up?
I don't know if you watch F1 or Drive to Survive, but there are top level teams like Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull, and then there are middle of the pack, best of the rest teams like McLaren, Alpine, and other teams. So I'm comparing Inter Miami to sort of like an Alpine McLaren right now. I think they're going to be not top, but just under some of the top level teams. I'm not saying that they're going to, run the gauntlet, but I think I agree with you. I think they're going to be 9th, 8th, 7th, fighting for a playoff spot at the end of the year. Decision day will probably be a really big thing for them. I think it'll probably go down to the wire. And I think we discussed this about the U.S. Open Cup. I think they'll maybe prioritize that as long as much as getting the playoffs. But I think getting a trophy like a U.S. Open Cup would be good. But as far as the playoffs go, I do think that they'll be just under that playoff line, maybe sneak in on the last couple of days of the season.
But Alex, we got a trophy, the Breezeway Airways Carolina Challenge Cup in preseason. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Which is important, by the way. We've talked about the importance of preseason and winning those trophies, winning that trophy, getting the games under their belt. It felt really good to win something as somebody who covers Inter Miami. It felt good to have something to be proud of. Their name is going to be on that trophy forever, and that's important.
Yeah.
And it also brought the team together. We got to see what they wanted to do in competitive scenarios, and that's exactly what they need in preseason. So that was really good. Now I do want to talk about the U.S. Open Cup though, because there's a lot riding on this season and that tournament. It hasn't been played in Inter Miami's history thus far. It was not played in 2020 because of COVID, not played in 2021 because they couldn't get back up after COVID, or during COVID, I should say. And now in 2022, there's a chance for anybody who wins this cup, other than, let me get this right, the MLS Cup champions, the Supporters Shield winners, and then the opposite conference leaders of the Supporters Shield, if that makes sense. So let's say the team in the East wins the Supporters Shield, the top team in the Western Conference wins the other CONCACAF Champions League spot. The 4th spot that goes to a North American team is reserved for the United States Open Cup, the Open Cup winner, I should say. And that, for me, you said it, is something that I think Miami could put focus on. This team is one that wants to have global branding. It's a team that wants to be in the global market, and no other better way to do that than international competition. And thus far, they've only played in MLS, I should say.
The
and
MLS.
I stopped myself. I told you I'm getting over it. I stopped myself in MLS, but to have this opportunity to win a tournament like the U.S. Open Cup and get into the CONCACAF Champions League in 2023 to boost your international reputation, I think it could be massive. And I think it's something that Inter Miami should focus on. And I think A lot of the fans might start realizing that the closer we get to that time where games start to kick off. I believe there are a couple of play-in games with other South Florida teams, and eventually they reach a stage where they play MLS teams. So hopefully, Miami can be one of those teams that make a deep run. I'm kind of expecting that from them. I think it's something they should prioritize, and that's something that I want to see, especially because I want to see this club in the CONCACAF Champions League. Alex, let me get your final remarks. Like, what do you want to tell anybody who's listening right now about this club in 2022 going forward throughout the season? Is there any important key points you want to make, and just kind of wrap things up here?
Yeah, I think this season we're going to see a tougher club to beat. I think with the players that they brought in, they really want to fight for the shirt and fight to win something. So I think there's going to be a lot of this team will be difficult to beat. Let's just say. I think looking at preseason, they were the Carolina Challenge Cup. I know it's preseason, but they played a really good Columbus Crew team, and even when Neville went in and put in some of the younger players, they went and they gave up a goal, but they held their own, and Columbus wasn't really able to threaten too much. So I think it'll be the season will be a more difficult team to beat. You're going to see a lot of young players from the academy come up with MLS Next Pro. Neville did confirm that players will have the ability to go back and forth from the first team to Inter Miami 2, now no longer Fort Lauderdale CF. So you're going to see guys like Noah Allen and eventually Harvey Neville get some playing time, and that's what this club is all about, really. Beckham said it, Moss said it. They want local. Well, Harvey's not local, but they want academy players coming up through the pipeline, playing for Inter Miami 2, getting their chance with the first team, and you'll see guys like Noah Allen and Harvey Neville, maybe like a Romeo Beckham, Abel Caputo, Braxton Najib. You'll see them get some playing time, and yeah, it's going to be a interesting season. Don't expect too much, but you'll have fun watching a team that is more difficult to beat and they're more together than they were last season.
Totally agree. Adrian, I'm going to get to you really quick here. Only offseason letdown, no Indiana Vassilev. I understand the frustration, and I am a huge fan of Indiana Vassilev, but I kind of think that it had almost all to do with the coaching change at Aston Villa. When Indiana Vassilev arrived, obviously Dean Smith was the manager there. He was sacked throughout at some point in the season because Villa weren't playing up to the standards that they need to. And with Gerrard going in, that might have been the change for Vassilev. There's probably a reason he came here on loan under Dean Smith, and the reason he went back. Obviously, the loan ended, but at the same time, there was a managerial change and maybe a better opportunity for him to thrive. However, he has not been on the pitch for Aston Villa, or even I don't think I've even seen him with the second team or the U23s at this point. But we're hoping that he can get his, land on his feet there. We respect Indiana Vassilev as a person, as a player. He did wonders for us, especially that Nashville goal. I'll never forget it. But yeah. And then lastly, Roger Terry, who will be the breakout player? You're betting on Bryce Duke. I think that that's a good shout. I'm hoping that he can recover fully in time for the beginning of the season. I know he's back in training. He was doing some individual work that I saw, I believe, on Wednesday. But for me personally, I'm going Emerson Rodriguez. I think that Emerson, I don't know if I'm stealing your thunder here, but Emerson Rodriguez just seems like one of the better technical players that are on the team. He was brought in for a significant, fee. They got him, and they think that he could be really, really good. They were cautious with him early, as they were with Leonardo Campana. Didn't want to stretch him out too much over preseason. We saw a little glimpse of him last year. I'm going to say Emerson is the breakout player that maybe some people aren't expecting, or maybe some Colombians probably are expecting. What about you, Alex? Do you agree, or do you have another name you want to throw out there? Because I just stole everything from you.
I do agree that was my name, but I'll raise you Robert Taylor. I think
okay.
In a lot of the season previews I've read, he wasn't mentioned, which is very bizarre to me. He's a national team player. He was arguably one of the better players on his previous club in Norway. He had 6 goals, 8 goals, 6 assists, or maybe 6 goals, 8 assists. But I'll have to double check his stats. But he was a very good contributor for them. He had, he was one of the assist leaders. He had a bunch of goals for them. I made a thread on what he'd bring to Inter Miami. I think he'll he'll either slot in that midfield three or even play alongside Gonzalo Higuain or Campana. I think the signing really went under the radar, which is surprising to me. Bringing in any national team player is absolutely huge for any MLS club. So a guy like Robert Taylor, who is creative, who is technical, who is quick, which is probably the most important thing, and has national team experience is absolutely huge. As far as how many goals or assists he'll score, it depends. We haven't seen him this preseason, but Neville did mention the other day that he had only 4 to 5 training sessions. So once he catches up to speed, I think Inter Miami fans will be really happy with him because I really do think he's a quality player.
Adrian, with that comment, you're making Alex very happy, by the way. She's a huge fan of George Acosta. I am also a fan of George Acosta. That guy has field vision like no other. He's amazing on set pieces. If he was starting every game, he'd be taking every set piece. He knows how to ping diagonal balls, put players in good positions, run the midfield. And then this preseason, with what we didn't see from him in Fort Lauderdale, was the defensive end of it. He turned it up a little bit. We saw it firsthand pitch side, especially against DC United. George Acosta definitely has the potential to be a key player in this team. I think personally it'll be off the bench at least in the first half of the year, but depending on how things go, we know how the days of summer go. We know how closer to the end of the year it goes, the luck that they've had so far in their first 2 years with injuries and things like that. George Acosta could potentially see significant minutes, and he could be a key player. But I think that just about does it. We kind of touched on a lot of different things there. Thank you guys for tuning in. Ricky, Roger, Adrian, we will be here all the time. If anybody else listening, we will be here all the time here on 5 Reasons Sports. And make sure tomorrow you check out our pre-recorded pre-game show against Chicago Fire. We didn't talk about that game specifically, but we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of it. We're going to talk about Xherdan Shaqiri. We're going to talk about how Miami should and probably will line up, and we'll get into all of that in our predictions as well. But for Alex Windley, for 5 Reasons Sports, I'm Austin Robillard, and we will see you guys very soon. Have a good one.